Welcome back, Excel super user. Today we are about to become the real super user in pivot table series, and this is our final frontier of pivot table, and we are about to familiarize ourselves with Power Query and Power Pivot in Office 365. Again, this is our video number 12, and then you can watch this in my iSelf Academy snippet and then Excel snippet YouTube channel in the name of Excel Super User Series, Excel User Series 6.0 and Excel Super User Program in Excel snippet here. In our last 3 or 4 days, we are in a journey to learn pivot table from scratch at the very basic level and to the advanced level possible. And in our last 2.5 or last 2 day session, so we touched somewhere around 56 variants of pivot table, again from scratch to the bottom today. And we are going to see the final leg or the final frontier of our pivot table by familiarizing Power Query and Power Pivot. So let's see how we are going to use this and what is a Power Query and what is a Power Pivot, why it is going to be a very useful or very important tool for us to learn. When I go for a Power Pivot or Power Query, so data consolidation will be the most important part of it. So when I go for Power Pivot, I will call this 3 or 4 days training as our one-stop shop for whatever you want to do in pivot table. When we come back to Power Query, so what a Power Query will do, again, when we are using Excel, the real problem is collecting the data, because pivot table does that beautifully in our golden rules. I said that we need to have a header first, and then we need to have a proper data set, and then if the data set is not proper, then what should we do, and so on and so forth. Again, sometimes the data is not going to come from one single source. So that is where our data is consolidation, manually achieving it will take a lot of time. And we are going to save a hell a lot of time by using the Power Query here. Again, if you want to establish yourself into the data world or data analytical world or any of the role in data, so if you're using Power BI as your go-to tool a little later after Excel, then the first instance of Power BI desktop will be your Power Query editor. And again, it does a lot more than what I'm going to do in our list. I'm just consolidating the data here. I will do a little bit of cleaning and cleansing, and then actually we can perform an ETL, that is extract, transform and load using Power Query 2. In our current data, I'm trying to consolidate them into one point because I'm keeping the data as clean as possible. Probably we will do one more class for the ETL process using Power Query in Excel. Again, that's going to be a little longer than normal, and we will keep having something as a thumb rule, and then we can start working with that. So at the moment in our Power Pivot Table 2.0, we are about to see consolidating data easily in Excel using Power Query. And if the data set is going to become a little larger, then Power Query might not really do anything great. So we have to move to the next dimension. So what is a Power Query? First of all, let's get into that and then see what we can do with it. So normally it allows you to import the data from an external source, probably a text file, or you can bring a multiple text file in a folder option, or you can bring in a database file, and so on and so forth. It allows you to clean the data. If you want to split the data, if you want to retain only certain columns out of the entire data set, you can do that. And it also allows you to transform the data. So if you want to again convert the data set into a proper data set, and then if you want to combine a multiple table into one, all these points can be done in transforming a data. And loading the data can be done very easily in an Excel sheet or in a data model, or you can create a pivot table cache and a Power Pivot data model if you wanted to. So when will you use a Power Pivot data model? So again, when my data sets are going to go bigger than normal. So if my data crosses 1 million row or 10 lakh 48 576 rows and above, then I have to move my data to a data model. So when I come back to Power Pivot, again, Power Pivot is, there is a lot of tool in Excel. So one of the very powerful tool in Excel is Power Pivot. Again, when I go for Power Pivot breaks the data into two major parts. One is called data model, another one is called a data model pivot table, and the data model is further broken into 2 or 3 different dimensions, where we can talk about columnar database. We talked about the relationship also a little bit yesterday, and we never talked about DAX functionality. Again, for the DAX functionality, I have to really dig deep into how I'm going to use this data. So we can see how we're going to use all these dimensions better. So let's see how we're going to use them in a real world scenario. So I'm going to take certain examples here, and then I'm going to make sure that our data works spick and span. Again, I gave you a small idea about what is a Power Query and what is a Power Pivot here. Let's jump into the data and then let's see what we're going to deal with it. When I come back to our data set, I have already said that we're going to see the introduction of a Power Query, and then we'll say when we will use a Power Pivot. So we saw both of them. So we will start with Power Pivot activations. Again, normally I'll be having the activations activated already, but I'll give you a small idea about how to activate it if you don't have a Power Pivot. Again, you don't really need a Power Pivot to showcase in your tab above. It's gonna be an easy way to log in. So go back to your data, and then you will see a data model window here. The moment you go down to this point, you will see manage data model. That's going to take you to the Power Pivot window. You don't need a separate data set. So let's see how we're going to use this, or let's see how to activate it. So if you want to activate a Power Pivot, the easiest way of doing it, so go to any one of the menu where you have a blank space, give a right click here, and then go to customize this ribbon. That's going to populate a window for you. Probably I'm jumping to Excel options actually, and then I'm going to go back to my add-ins. The moment I go to add-ins, you can see that if your data sets already have a Power Pivot for Excel, you can see that this is the Power Pivot for Excel is there. Again, this is in your active application add-ins here. If there are something that I've deactivated it, that will be coming at the bottom. Probably if you are not activated Power Pivot, you will see the Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel will be coming at the bottom. Again, the good news is if you are using Power Pivot in the recent version, you will have in every version possible, because Power Pivot and Power Query has become a soul. Because earlier when we started working with Power Pivot and Power Query, it was reserved for top versions like Professional Plus versions or Business Edition or Office application for Office applications are given. And again, let me just be more precise here, because I don't want to just blabber around something. Probably you can use something like this version's app for enterprises, app for business, and so on and so forth. Again, if you are using Power Pivot in the latest version, then you can get those dimension perfectly for us. So to activate it, I've already activated it, so I'll go back to customize ribbon, go to add-ins, and if you don't see them on top and if you're seeing at the bottom of the application which is inactive, then you just come down to the manage at the bottom, select the com add-ins, and then click the go button here. That's going to populate the data for you, and you have to check Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. The moment you do it, you will get this Power Pivot window automatically as another menu for you, and this is going to be a fixed menu. It's not going to be a floating menu for you. So this is how I'll activate Power Pivot. Again, I kept them in order on top, so I just started going by order. Let's try to bring in a Power Query data consolidation with text files. Again, if I'm having only one file, I don't want to really consolidate of them. I can just open them and then start importing that into an Excel and start working on it. But I'm about to use more number of files here. We'll try to create most of our data sets in our new sheet because I want to keep them all in a brand new sheet. I don't want to put them in a same sheet wherever we have a data set, and then I'm going to take as many new sheets as possible. So I'm going to create a new Excel workbook, and then this is the workbook that I'm going to work on. And if you are having a data set, now this is the data that I am about to take for our usage. Again, I've added this in our files here, so you will be having a separate folder here, or if you're using, if I'm making these data sets available for you in a folder option, probably you will see a data like class 12 folder here. I'm using Power Query and I'm going to use the text files here. When I go for text files, I have two different files. Let me just make sure that I have 17 to 22. Yes, that's nice. And then I'm going to just remove the 70 to 22 out of this equation here. And then let me make it more data available for us. So I'm going to copy paste this. And let me see how many data I have here. Okay, let me just take this out of the equation. Let me just open this, and because I'm creating everything in here completely, so I'm going to use 22, 23, 24. Yes. I'll make some necessary changes here. By that way, we can use all this data better. I'm keeping all my data sets in here. Again, I have just got all this data from the list here, so I'm going to call this as 21 to 23, 22. And then I'm going to close and save it. So let me just make all these data that work for me in a particular pattern. Again, I'm going to convert this into 23. And then I'm going to convert this into 24. So now I have a data almost until the last year end. So now I have a lot of data for the new, and I have a lot of data on the old folder. Again, rule number one, when we go for Power Query, our data's model has to be similar. For example, if you open this first data, the 2014 and 2015 and 2016, I'm opening all the three here. If you closely watch all these three files, these three files might have a different data set, but they are all similar in pattern. You can see the month comes first, the sales is coming last in all the three dimensions. So when I consolidate or when I use a Power Query, it's going to bring the data one below the other one. So the first file will be 2014, the next file will be 2015, the subsequent file will be 2016 here. So it's going to order them one below the other one. By that way, it's going to consolidate the data, then I can get the result that I want here. Why we need to use Power Query? So why it is so important to do so? Again, when I started working with Power Query allows you to do things that no other data does it beautifully. The first part is, if you are bringing in all the file in one single format, putting them inside a data set, or I can consolidate all of them in one single shot by using a logic called a folder option here. So how do I do that? So let me just showcase the methodology first, and then I'll explain you why Power Query is very powerful. Probably I'll show you in a direct example if I wanted to. Normally when an organization comes into play, if you're collecting data for a larger number of years, for example, 10 or 11 years of data to consolidate and get an overview of what's happening on the year front, how the data set works beautifully, how it has incremented our sales. Are we really growing big, or are we stagnated somewhere or other? To know all this dimension, we might have to compare and contrast a historical data set for us. So for a historical data set consolidation, Power Query and Power Pivot will be a most phenomenal usage. Or if your data are large, you don't need to have an historical data to do so. If your data is very big, you can work around with the data better. So let's see how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go back to my data, and then I will start with the get data functionality here. Again, I have a lot of information here. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm trying to create one program based on Power Query and Power Pivot alone. Maybe a recorded session for you because if I started putting them as a live class, that's going to cost us a lot. So let me put a recorded class in my website where I'm going to charge $2.99 for a program. So where we'll have a complete program like we do get in our YouTube. Again, that YouTube is free. This one I would like to keep it as a paid services because not a lot of people will be using this. Only bigger managers or the data people who have a huge data with them, they will be using it. So let me come back to our data set again. So I'm going to use the file option here. You can pull the data one by one, or you can pull them all either from a folder or from a SharePoint folder if I have them all. I can also bring in a data from a database. I can bring in a data from a cloud. I can bring in a data from a Power Platform. I can bring in a data from online services other than Azure, and then I can bring the data from all the other sources, and I can do a lot more here. What I'm about to do right now is I'm going to append the data by bringing it from a folder option here. I'm going to bring one by one. I'm going to bring all at once. Again, when I go for append, it says workbook. So when I bring in an Excel file, this will be useful. If I'm bringing in from other sources, I'm going to go back to my file, from file, and then from folder here. It's going to take a little time, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Sometime it will take a little more than normal because it has to activate the .NET framework for us to populate this data. It's asking you a question where your data lies. I'm going to go and check the data where I have it. So I'm having that data in my Excel free batch 2, and then I have it inside the class 12, and then I'm going to go for Power Query, and then I'm going to pick up the text file, and then I'm going to pick up the old file here. Then when I open that, that's going to showcase the 3 files that I've just now opened and showed you. What are those? Whenever I do this, I have an advantage. When I do deal with a text file or when I do deal with a CSV file, I can combine them directly here. But I would like to make them more better, and then I want to confirm what's happening in each and every point. I don't want to just see the navigation button by using the first box called combine data. Again, I can do the following in a combine data. I can combine and transform data. I can combine and load, and I can combine and load too. I can get the information direct here. I'm not going to go for a direct data set here. Instead, I'm going to go for the transform data to showcase you the Power Query editor here. When I go for the transform data, it's going to take you to another window called Power Query editor. Again, this is almost a similar window you will see in Power BI desktop too, but I'm interested only keeping this to an Excel, not to the Power BI desktop. In this data set, you can see a lot of information that comes into play. Again, if you're updating something on a constant basis by a date and time, and you're bringing in a SharePoint folder into it, this is gonna be the life changer for a data updates. Only thing that you have to see that whether your data accuracy is perfect or not. If you can able to control that better, you can do wonders. Again, I'm not talking about any automations here. So if you are keeping a Power Automate into place and then Power Apps into place, then this is gonna do wonders for us. Again, I have one catch when I do deal with this sort of data, because I'm curtailed to 250 MB size if I'm working inside Excel, because after that Excel might not take up a larger data set, and then I will be in a spot of bother. Again, I'm talking about the number of rows here, not the size of the data here. So when you're working on Power Query and Power Pivot, hope you are adding the data which is within the limit of 250 MB of data sets here. So let's jump back to the next list. I'm going to go back to this data. I'm going to retain the first column. I'm going to give a right click here and then remove other columns completely. If you want to retain something, you can do that. So I'm going to remove the data set. I'm going to keep 2 of them. Again, anyway, that's not going to be useful for me after once I extract the data here. But again, and I want to see what are the data that comes into play. I'm going to click this double arrow mark here. This is called combined data set here. I'm going to click this. That's going to take you to the data automatically. Now, as I said earlier, this is going to populate my data one below the other one. So it shows you a preview of the first file and how the first file is going to look like. The moment I give an OK, that's going to populate the data one below the other one. Again, I'm going to use up this data and I'm going to load this data into my Excel sheet because I'm only taking 36 rows here. So I have only 12 months a year. I have only 3 years with me, and I'm going to load this data into my Power Query Editor. The second excellency when I do deal with Power Query is it allowed me to consolidate the data in the preview level here. When I add them, this consolidation is going to become a tabled data set for me. So as we saw in our earlier classes, when my data are converted into table, that's going to become dynamic for me. If I want to add other data below than that, the dynamic range will automatically expand itself. Then in the pivot table creation portion, I have to just refresh the pivot table. That's going to take the data set automatically for me. Let's load this data to an Excel file. So I'm going to go back to the data set here, and then when I go to the first option in the home tab, it gives you a close and load, and I have a small drop down coming up below. Showcases two options. One is called close and load, another one is close and load 2. Again, when I go for a close and load, it's going to load the data in a brand new sheet. It creates a new sheet called the so and so sheet name, that's called old year, and then that's going to load that data in a tabular form. When I go for a close and load 2, it will question you where you want to load it, how you want to load it, and so on and so forth. The second option, I always use it to a Power Pivot option, not generally in a Power Query. Again, the option is literally how you want to use it. You can use it wherever you feel that the data are taking a lot of time to load. Normally when we work in Excel, we will see a ring that comes into play on processing a data when we maintain a data pathetically, or our data set have a lot of gaps, so the system takes too much of time to load the data. Move them all to Power Query Editor. So that's gonna make our life a little more easier, because Power Query Editor works a little faster than a normal Excel sheet. The data model will make our life much more easier in handling larger data sets here. We will see that also when we are gonna deal with ETL process of Power Query. At the moment, I'm just consolidating the data completely. I'm gonna go for close and load here. The moment I do that, that's gonna populate the data in a brand new sheet for me at the bottom, and then it's going to name them as old year. I can see that all the years are coming up here, and you can see the number of rows I have in the data set here. Now I got 3 years of data with me. Then I am also going to create a pivot table in the same sheet. I'll go to Alt NVT, and then that's going to add the pivot table window for me. I'm going to put them in the same sheet, and then it's going to name the data set based on the table name here, and then I'm going to give an OK. That's going to add a pivot table here. The moment I click the month, that's going to make all the data set for me. I'm interested only the yearly sales here. I'm going to uncheck all the unwanted data and add a sales here. And we all know how to use the pivot table better, so I'm going to make the data set look a little better. So go back to design, report layout, show in tabular form, and then right click and go to field settings, so that the years only comes in here, not the month. And then I'm going to give a right click here, go back to value field settings here, and then I'm going to call this as yearly sales, because I don't want to call this as sales year. And then I'm going to add an accounting number formatting to the data sets here. So the moment I do that, that's going to add a list here. Once I get this data, now I'm getting the other years. If you are using without a Power Query, then we have to consolidate the entire data one more time again. As I'm using Power Query Editor, this is going to make my life a little easier for me. So let me go back to our data set where we have a data set, and then I'm going to bring all my new files into the old folder here. So I'll go back to my Power Query old text files, and then I'm open the new folder, copy all of them. Again, I will ask you to do one more dimension when we are working on this data set. That means you have to check whether all our data set is intact. Is doing a good job or not? We will see those in this. You can see all the files are added. Now the Power Query is gonna make our life super cool. I'm gonna just give a right click here, and then the moment I refresh the data, my data will be loaded here. And then again, check whether you have any blanks in between, because this is gonna really disrupt your data. If not, you can see the number of rows, only 132 rows. I'm very happy about it. Now I'm going to give a right click and then refresh this, and then you get all our data set beautifully. Again, I hadn't changed any dates in the last one because I just created this in front of you, so all data comes in this place. Now I can make this data even better. Yesterday we used 1 point, I want to find out the percentage grand total, drag the years again, and then again it showcases, oh, sorry about that, I dragged the year here, sorry about that. I'm going to drag the sales here, give a right click, and then show the value in the column total or grand total percentage. Again, I'm seeing a good start in the 2014, then I have a drop at my sale. Again, my sale has raised again, and again I'm keeping this data constant, so that's why I have a problem. So let me just change this data and see what happens. I'm going to minimize this, go back to the raw data again. I'll change certain files here. Again, this is this beauty of Power Query. I intentionally left those numbers as it is, so I'm going to go back to 2022. I'm going to change some numbers here. I'm going to call this as 44, I'm going to call this as 54, 64, 44 and 34 here. So I'm going to close and then save it. I'll refresh all of them a little later because I want to change all this dimension as much as I can. So I'm going to make this as 54, 64, 74, 54 and 49. I'm going to close and save this because I'm changing the data as much as I can, and then I'm going to open this data also. I'm going to make this as 84, 74, 74, 84 or 70. I'm going to close and save this. Again, now I have literally changed the entire sales for me, and I want that thing to be updated automatically. I'll go back to my data set here. I'm going to refresh this. This is going to refresh my table first, and then once I refresh my pivot table, I will get a different number altogether. Again, this refresh is taken into consideration of what? Okay, let me just refresh this data. Again, it is taking a lot of time. I think that the data set refresh is not happening here. Okay, let me just change the data here itself. Am I doing it in the right place, or am I doing it somewhere else? So let me check the data source here. Yes, I'm taking the data properly. Yes. Okay. My data is not refreshing in the data sets there. Let me just see whether I can able to refresh this data completely. Okay, this data refresh is not happening as I wish it to be. Let me try this after some time, because now the refresh is taking a little longer than normal. So now you can see my sales are gradually increasing here, and this will be increasing because if I change the dates and the other dimensions, this is going to also increase drastically, and I can see that yes, I'm growing. Again, there is a small downside of my data set, and I can use the data set better. Now I would like to put them in conditional formatting on an icon sets, and you can see that the data sets are going in a particular dimension. So again, I'll keep the data set here nice and clearly. Again, if this is taking on a percentile basis, I believe you can change the data accordingly, and then you can make sure that the data sets are going to be different. You can create a KPI index when you want to work with a conditional formatting here. Again, a conditional formatting goes by percentage here. Let me just edit this data. Yes, it goes by percentage. Yes, I'm interested in going for a percentage by maybe anything above 10 is nice, anything above 50 is also nice. I'm going to just make a small change here. By that way I can just see that wherever I have a value above 5 will be in a mid-range of it. Wherever I have a value above 50% of the sales that I have here, that's going to change my data set beautifully. You can see that data nice and clearly here. Again, as I've added this into the dimension, so let me just add one more field here. I'll convert that into percentage of grand total, and then move the field above and convert this into percentage grand total, and then I want to just check this dimension is icon representation. So I'm going to just select this data below and then come back to conditional formatting, more rules, edit, show the icon alone, and then that's going to showcase the icon and make it in the center. So now I can see something a little differently here. So if I don't want the total here, I can remove the total at the bottom of my screen here. So, but again, I wish to keep the data set in this way so that the growth pattern can be seen without a graph here. I'm not using a graph, I'm using a conditional formatting to create an icon sets here. So this is the way we consolidate a data in a text function. So let me just save this data, Power Query using text function or using text data. Let me put them back again to our class 12 file. So this is how I'll consolidate a data in Power Query, and then I can get the data set that I want here. So the next logic that I will go for this time around is I'm gonna take another data here. So what we have completed right now is Power Query data consolidation with a text file. I'm going to do that with a CSV file. I'm going to do that with an Excel file too. And if time permits, I will do the other two dimension also. Again, CSV file is going to become typically the same way that we do use a text file. So I'm going to go back to my data, get data from file and from folder, and then I'm going to go for Power Query, and this time around I'm going to take the South Indian sales of our data. Again, this data I'll just show a preview of this data once, and then probably we can go through the process a little more pacier here. So this is the data that I have here. I have 4 different cities with me. These are the cities that I keep in the southern region of India. Again, I'm bringing in Mumbai also into South India as per the Indian map. If I bifurcate India into half of Gujarat and Orissa will all be in South Indian state. Again, we call only South Indian state as only 4 here. We call Andhra, Telangana, Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So we don't call Mumbai anymore as the South Indian part. But if I bifurcate India into half, probably Mumbai and Orissa will all be a part of South India. I don't know why they stick to the North Indian part of Odisha. When I go back to the file called Bengaluru CSV, I have 4 different cities where I have my branches, and I have the following sales on those cities here. So my data is going to be in this particular pattern. So let me just make them more readable for us. Again, I know the location of this data set, and then I can just see the data, how it works for me, and I can see all the city that comes into play. And then you can see the dates, and you can see the sales, and then you can see the store ID that I have here. So now this is the same way all my other files is also going to be. So I'm going to just consolidate them. So I'll come back to my data. I'm taking a brand new worksheet, so I'm not bringing in I'm not doing the same sheet. I'm bringing in a new workbook, and then bringing the data from a folder. South Indian sales is the folder that I want to import into a data set here, and then I'm seeing all the 4 here. I'm going to use transform data, and once the transform data comes into play, I can retain first 2 columns. Generally I don't use this second column in any point. I'm going to give a right click and then remove the other column which I don't want, and then I'm going to extract this data in one below the other. And again, this data is a little larger than normal. Earlier I picked up a data which is only 12 months of sales, but this data is humongous here. I'm going to give an OK. That's going to showcase the data here, and this data is going to, I believe it is 800,000 rows or 8 lakh rows or more here. I'm not very sure about it. Again, in a Power Query data, there is one point which I wish to see better. If I load a data, if I can able to bring the data, and then when I can just scroll the data, if it gives the number here in Power BI desktop, That's going to show the number of data here, and the bottom of also it's not going to show, it says only 999 plus rows here. It never gives you the right number of rows that I have in my data set. I cannot preview that here. If anybody who works in the Power Query edition, and probably I should not name Mr. Mark here, because Mark is a person who have developed it, and he's the one who also runs SQL BI, and he is the one who did something phenomenal that we all imagine of doing it. Mr. Russo, please see to that you can get something in the new version where we can, if you're still working on Power Query here, so why don't you bring in a preview edition that how many rows are added in this list. So I don't want to see that once I load the data into Power Query. Instead I want to see them much before than that. Now I got all my data sets coming up here. I'm going to just come and say close and load, and that's going to add a new sheet to me, and then it's going to name the sheet as South Indian City Sales here. And this data is loading here. You can see that the data sets are loading here. I am seeing 500,000 rows here, and okay, that's awesome. It's not 800,000 rows, it's only 664 to 71. I think that I can add another 300,000 sorry, yeah, I can add another 300,000 rows here. Furthermore, now I got all my sales coming up here. I cannot add beyond 300,000 rows, then I'll be in a spot of bother. I would like to know the CD wise sales is what here. I'm going to just give Alt NVT, and I'm going to put them the same sheet, and then I'm going to just bring back the cursor to I, and then I'm going to add them to the I column, and then I'll add the city, and then I'll add a sales here. That's going to give the list here. So let me just make it a little bigger and readable for us. And now I would like to put them all in a proper data set. So design, report, layout, and show in tabular form. Right click, value field settings, number formatting to accounting, and then I'm going to call this as city sales or city wide sales. So that's going to give me the sales on each and every dimension. If you want to find the percentage of sales that's happening in the city, then drag one, give a right click here, and then I'm going to just say column or percentage here. So my major chunk of the sales is coming from Chennai and Mumbai. If you want to showcase something, the differences between the top and the bottom here, I can drag the sales again and use the data that we used earlier. I'm going to go for show value as. I want to show the differences from, and then the city that I'm going to pick is the topmost city called Chennai. Give an OK, then that's going to say that the sales. Again, I will just bring this, let me try to bring the format painter here at the moment. So that's going to showcase the data for me automatically. Let me just remove two columns here so I can see all of them in one single dimension. So you can see the differences between the sales that we have done here. The Mumbai sale is down by 22 lakhs. The Hyderabad sales is done by 51 lakhs, and Bengaluru sales, again Bengaluru sale data is lesser. It's 1 crore 72 lakhs lesser than the Chennai sales done here. So you can just bring the data set here. I'm going to call this as percentage total, and then I'm going to call this as difference compared to Chennai. This is the way we can build a data set, and then I am showing you the variances that we have in our list. This is how I'll use a Power Query using a CSV file. Again, this file was a little bigger than the normal one, and again the number of rows are not really intimidated me. If the number of rows is going to be closer to what the Excel sheet sizes, then I'll be in a spot of bother. The next file that I'm about to bring right now is going to be an Excel file to Excel, and this is what most of the people will love to see in here. Again, I will try to add timeline for all the programs that I've, or all the videos that I've added recently, because I want to upload it immediately, so I didn't work out on a lot on the timelines here. So if I go for timestamps for the file, then people who are already aware of the other dimensions, they can concentrate on what they want to learn exactly in our list here. The next file that I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pick up the Excel files here. I'm going to bring the Excel to Excel file in our data set. So I'll go back to the data set again. I'm going to jump back to the Power Query and I'm going to pick up the folder option here. Again, I have only 3 data sets here. Let me just bring a lot more than what we have here. Again, yeah, I have a lot more here. So yep, I'll add this first of all, and then I'll try to add these dimensions a little later. Am I missing anything here? 2021, 22 and 20. Okay, right, I have only lesser data with me. Okay, let me just consolidate this around. So I'll show you how I'm consolidating this data, then we'll see how we're going to add this data. So I'm going to consolidate this again. There will be a slight change when we bring in an Excel file into dataset again, because I cannot combine them directly like I did the previous 2 files here. Let me go back to the dataset, add a new sheet. Again, the style and the usage front is going to be similar. There is that slight change that we are about to see when we are working with an Excel import into an Excel file here. I'm going to go back to my data, get data from file and from folder, and this is where I'm going to bring in the Power Query into play and bring the folder option into play. I have only 3 files here, and this 3 file is not going to be very big, so I'm going to just add all these 3 files into play. I'm going to transform the data because I cannot load them directly here, and in transformation I'm going to make some small changes here. So until certain points, my Power Query and Power Pivot both will remain same. Until this point, the process is similar, but extracting this data is going to be the key here. This is where I'm going to use the Power Query editor a little more than in the other 2 dimensions. I'll go back to my add column here, and then I'll click the custom column, because in an Excel I'm bringing in a multiple sheets or multiple workbooks into one single workbook to consolidate here. I'm not bringing in multiple sheets here, so we will have one more scenario where we will see multiple sheets accumulation at one point. I'm going to use an M language formula here called Excel dot workbook here. Again, I'm going to open the bracket here. I'm going to take the content that I have here. Normally when I bring the data, normally our data set might have a chance that our data comes from the second line, not from the first line. My header would have been posted as a data here, so to avoid that I will always use a command at the last called true. Again, if you don't have it, it's not going to really bother your data. If you have your header as your data, then you might require this true, or else you have to do one more process a little later. The moment I give an OK, that's going to extract my data. It's going to showcase a table for us. Again, this is going to showcase the table, not the data inside the Excel file. When I extract this data, that's going to showcase a big list here. Whenever I do this, I'll always load the entire data first, and then I will uncheck the last line below, because this will unnecessarily add the name of the header in front of all this name. I don't want that. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to give an OK. That's going to extract the data completely for us. Again, I only had 3 data, but it shows a lot of data here because I have a name manager maintained for a specific data. So I don't need the name manager. I'm going to remove in the kinds. I don't want a defined name here. I'm going to give an OK. And I have 4 data here. Again, I'm not even interested in the sheet which has a sheet 1 here, so I'm going to remove that also in another dimension here. So now I have only 3 data with me. I'm good to go with the next extraction level. But the next extraction level happens when I have an arrow mark like this. Earlier I had an arrow mark on double post, because probably an arrow mark which I can see on the combined file double arrow marks below. But when I extract the data, I have to extract furthermore. So I'm going to retain this data alone, remove the other columns. I'll click this. That's going to showcase the data that I have inside this. Let me load all of them. Again, I have one additional column that comes in play, column 9. If you want to see this data and then extract it, then you can do that, or else I'll just extract this because I don't have a column name in it. When I give an OK, that's going to extract and put all the data in place here. Again, when I bring this data, sometimes my data might not showcase the data properly. If you see, Power Query allows you to transform the data. Now we can see that every Power Query says ABC 1 2 3 on top here. That means it didn't deny or it didn't add a right formatting for the specific column here. If you want to make sure the data sets are coming properly here, you can select them all, and then you can find out what kind of data that we have below, and we can switch the data type accordingly. So when I click this, you can see a lot of data type comes in place here. Again, and I'm not going to sit and do it manually. I'm going to automate this by just selecting this, go to your transform data and click detect data type. By that way, that's going to read the data below, and then it's going to pick the data format accordingly. Now it has become a date, it has become a text in the first two column, it has become a whole number, text again, and whole number furthermore here. Now my data is not too big. I have only 3 years of data. Probably if I have all data together, it is not going to be more than 1009 items here. So I'm going to go back to my home tab. I'll say close and load again. I'm not going to use a close and load 2. I'm yet to use the close and load here. And now the data are loaded with the proper data set, and it shows me that I have 1036 rows here. Now I'm going to create, this is the data that we saw many times, and then my data are a little wibbly wobbly here because I'm adding the invoice number in between. I don't know, something is wrong here. Is the data are perfectly coming here, or it is giving anything weird? Or probably yes, my data are jumbled here, but again it is not really going anything weirdly tossed. So my invoice number is moved to the 4th column instead of the 1st column. Other than that, the rest of them are fine. I'll add another pivot table right now. I'm going to say Alt NBT, put them in a brand new sheet, and then add our data set for customer wise or product wise sales. Again, I know the product wise sales here. Now I'm going to make it a little bigger and then make them into a proper data set, and then add, I'll leave the sum of sales as it is. I'm going to add the numbers here alone, and then I'm going to add two more columns to my data set. Bring the sales below once, bring the sales below twice. I want to see the percentage of sales here, and then I want to see the top seller compared to the other dimensions here. So now I got the list. Again, I will try to do a value filtering because this I want to make sure that it brings the data if I add a new data set also. And you can see that this is percentage total, and then I'm going to find out differences from Apple 7 Plus, and then I'm going to call this as product sales. So this is the way we can build our data set from a Power Query to Power Pivot. I've used an Excel data to consolidate the data set for our list here. So now I will finish the other dimensions also because I want to use the Power Pivot also. Again, even though we have lesser time, I will try to extend this. I'll finish this all completely so that we will not have any issues, or we don't want to propel this to the next class here, because next class I would like to start with sum is functionality, and then I want to start with the lookups and VLOOKUPs and so on and so forth. So I thought of doing that today, but unfortunately my timing is taking a little longer than normal. So let me just jump to the next topic that we're going to see with it. So we already saw why we are using a Power Pivot here. So where I will use Power Pivot, I will reiterate that again. Wherever my data sets are beyond Excel capacity, I will use it. Because if I don't do that, then it's going to shout at you saying that. So I'll do this twice for us, even though it's going to consume a little time for us. I'll do the CSV file addition twice. One without moving that to a Power Pivot, one with moving the data into the Power Pivot for us. What data that I'm going to take right now? I'm going to take a data which is a little bigger, so I'm going to go for Power Pivot folder. I'm going to take this data. So I have around 13 files here. Yes, I have different cities here. My presence in these cities are there. My offices are all around India right now. So I have one in Ahmedabad, Bengaluru, Chennai, Delhi, Hyderabad, Jaipur, Kanpur, Kolkata, Mumbai, Nagpur, Patna, Pune, and Surat. And again, these are the locations I have my data set, and I know these data sets are clean. I'm bringing in all my data sets in a clean environment for us, and what I am about to do right now is I'm going to consolidate them all. I know that this data is going to be big. When I select the data entirely and then give a right click and then go to the property, if this does not touch 250 MB, I'm happy about it. It's only touching 66 MB. I can still use them nice and clearly in a Power Pivot completely. So let me go back to the data set. I'll create a new file. Again, all this file is a CSV file. I can consolidate them all, but when I load them, after a point it is going to shout at you. I'm not going to put them in a Power Pivot immediately. I'm going to put them first in Power Query. Let's see what kind of an error message that we are going to get. I'll go back to the data. Again, CSV file addition you already know a bit because you just now saw a while ago. So I'm going to just do all those dimensions again. Oh my god, I took the entire data set. Let me just, I'm sorry about that. Let me just come back, and then because I have to pick the right folder here, because I'm picking the whole folder here, which I don't want. I'm going to pick India, and then I'm going to add the data set here. That's going to showcase all my files here, and I know that the extensions are similar. Then I can consolidate them by using a folder option. If the extensions are different, please don't ever try to consolidate them. It's going to be a messy output for us. Go back to transform data, and then you can see the entire list of sheet that's going to populate here, and I'm going to extract all of them. I'm not going to retain the name of it. I'm going to give a right click on the first column, remove all the other columns. I can consolidate all of them here. The problem that I said a while ago, and I even request Mr. Russo to do something if he still works in the Power Pivot team. I'm going to give an OK there. That's going to populate all the data, and it doesn't going to show the data set for me or the numbers that we are about to get here. Again, I know the numbers here very clearly because I've built this data. So we will be having 22 lakh rows or 2 million plus rows here. That's the number of rows that we have here. If I put this data inside the Power Query option, it will load the data until the data can manage itself. So the moment the data feels that it cannot handle the larger data set, it is gonna just tell you that I'm sorry, I cannot load them anymore. So let me just load them in an Excel sheet. Let's see what happens. Now I have a sheet name called India. That's going to create an Indian sheet for me in my system, and then it's going to load, and you will see the number of data set that is going to load. It's going to showcase entirely, but it will shout at you after a point saying that I cannot load the data beyond an Excel capacity. So now I'm already touching 7, 8, 9. Almost I'm crossing. Yeah, I've crossed the Excel availability of rows here, and I'm crossing that on double the size right now. So I have 15 lakh rows, 16 lakh rows, 17 and a half, 18 and a quarter, 19 and a quarter, 1989, 20 and a half, 21 and a half, 21 and a quarter, and 22 and a half, and near to the quarter. This is the query message will come into play. The problem that we will have when we are using a Power Query and Power Pivot, we don't have an undo option here. So you have to restart the entire process again from scratch. If I give an OK, this is going to only load data until 10 lakh 48,576 rows here. But I have 22 lakhs 2,545 rows on my right hand side here. You can see the Indian sheets is giving you more than that. Again, it says that the result of this query is too larger to load in the specific location on the worksheet. Worksheet have the limit of 10 lakh 4576 rows and 16,894 columns. Please load the query to the data model instead. It's giving you session 2. Please move them to Power Pivot. Please don't do this in a Power Query for us. So I will literally I will close this data. I will reopen another data completely from scratch, and then I'll start doing one more time. I'm going to add a new sheet. This time around I'm going to change the to Power Pivot. There will be a slight variant when we are doing this. I'm going to just make one small change here. I'm going to go back to the rest of the styles similarly. I'm not doing anything new on the Power Query until one point. So most of our data are going to remain same, and I'm just keeping all these dimension as it is. When I load the data, this is the first time I'm about to use the logic called close and load to. The close and load to will allow me to tell me where we can add this data, number one. And not only that, it's going to say that whether we're going to create the connection between the data and the table, and so on and so forth. And I can also add one more dimension to the data set that is called add this data to a data model, because so far whatever I've done it's going to go for the Excel sheet. For the first time, I'm going to go for the close and load. This is the changes that we are doing when we are moving a data from a Power Query to a Power Pivot. Go back to close and load 2. That's going to pop up a window for you and ask you a question. What do you want to do? I'm not going to load this in an Excel sheet, so I'm going to keep this as only create a connection, and then I'm going to check this data to add the data to a data model and give an OK there. The moment I do that, that's going to load all my data set, but I may not be able to visibly see that in my Excel file because it is not loading in my Excel sheet. Instead, this is loading my data inside my data model. Again, I showed you how to activate a Power Pivot at the beginning of our session. So we will go to the Power Pivot, and then I'll show you how I'm going to create a pivot table from a Power Pivot. And that's the beauty of this Power Pivot. Again, you can do a lot more here. I'm just showing one of them. So I want to find out the Indian city-wise sales as a graph here, or I can create a pivot table with the charts and pivot both together like I did yesterday on the recommended pivot table or pivot chart here. Now it creates the data for me. Now where I can see this data, it's loaded the data. How do I know whether the data is loaded correctly or not? This is where I will go back to my Power Pivot. This is where we need a Power Pivot window and go back to the manage data here. The moment I do that, that's gonna add the data set for us. And now I get all my data set below. And now I'll have a question. So do I have to go back to insert tab to insert a pivot table? No, you don't want to. The Power Pivot for Excel will give you one dimension here called Power Pivot for Excel and I have a separate table called pivot table here, and I can do pivot table a little differently. Normally we see pivot table from a table and a range, external data source, a data model, or from a Power BI, but this is a different window altogether. I'm going to create a pivot table and a chart vertically. And then it will ask you a question. We want to put it in a new sheet. No, I'm going to put them in the Excel sheet. Already I have one sheet. Then you can see both of them coming up here. I'm going to go back here and I'll say city wise sales, please add it. Sometimes this data might not give you the right answer because of the system might not took the data correctly. So but again, I think that this data took it correctly, I believe so. Yes, let me just check whether my data sets are coming properly. I'll editing the Power Query connections here and seeing whether the data sets are coming perfectly here. Yes, it's giving you all the right data point here. That's perfect. And then again, when I go back to Power Query, here comes the real issue, because when I go for Power Pivot here, the cleaning and cleansing option will be a little odd here. So I'm going to just clear the unwanted fields here, and then in pivot table I just click this data and then type something in here and then try to bring that data here. So for example, if I try to bring city wise sales in India, if I want to bring this into the data set, when I come down here, when I go back to equals, and then when I try to add this cell reference and give an enter, this will not add in a Power Pivot option. In a normal pivot table, it will allow you to do that. So I will always have this. I don't know why this is another thing that we might require. Again, Mr. Russo, if you're still working in the team here, so please, I need you to fix this part also. So I'm going to copy this and then I'm going to add a chart title. Then I'm going to just come down and paste it here, and this is where it will come into play. Again, I'll have one more dimension here. Again, I'm adding this data set. Again, the number formatting is also going to give a bigger task for me. So I'll go back to access and then I'll convert this into all of them are millions, I believe so. Yes, again, now I'm gonna have to do them again. So this is not really working with the data perfectly for me. So now I have to just change all these dimensions and then make sure the data sets are coming perfectly here. So this is something which is I will manually do it in my system. Again, this is something which we have as an issue in Power Query. So changing the number formatting and then making them work accordingly in a charts and slicer or in a charts and a data set is always a real headache. Again, we are achieving the lot of data here, so we will literally save time. So you can use this as your data set here. So this is how I'll consolidate a power pivot when the data sets are humongous here. This is the first example of power pivot, and I'm using a CSV file to do that. And I'm going to use this also in an Excel file. So how do I do that? That's the next agenda that we're going to see here. As we are crossing a 1 hour mark, I would like to finish it because it's going to take another 10 or 15 minutes time for us. It's not going to really do anything very odd here. So we will see what it is going to do when we are working on it. Then we will plan according to the data sets here. So by that way, this will make our life a little more easy. The final one on our 60 plus data set, we will see how to use a power pivot in an Excel file. Again, I'm going to take another data here. This time around, I'm going to take the data from my power pivot again. This time around, I'm going to take this 3 data. So I have 3 data only, but again, the size of this data is not 66 MB. It's going to be more than 30 MB here. I have 31.7 MB of data with me. Again, I'll add a new sheet. Again, I know that I'm bringing in the data set. Again, you know how to use the power pivot right now. So I'm going to follow these dimensions a little faster so to save time. I'm adding the large data set to the data set and then transform the data. And then retain the first column, remove the other columns which we don't want, and then use the add column, custom column, because it is an Excel to Excel file import. I'm doing it, and I'm going to use Excel.workbook, open bracket, take the content, give a comma, always give a true here, close the bracket, and then you can see a syntax errors are not there, give an OK. That's going to extract the data set for me. I'm going to click this data, and then I'm going to uncheck this and then load the whole data for me. And when I give an OK, I only saw 3 data in here, but when I move the data out, I'll be seeing more than 3 data here. The reason why is I've created a table feature to the data sets. So that's going to showcase the data in 2 different dimensions, one in a sheet, another one in a table. You can pick any one of them here. Don't put both of them because that is going to duplicate your data twice, or it's going to bring the year multiple times. Then it's going to show sales more than what we actually achieved it. So when you're bringing in this data, so pick up any one dimension. Don't pick other 2 dimensions also, because don't pick one in sheet, one in table, one in sheets. That might really give you make you or end you in some kind of a trouble later. Now we can see that I have F1 sales twice, F sales twice, F sales 2 twice, F sales 3 twice, and you can see the kinds here. The kinds are table and sheets here. You can either pick up a table to consolidate, or you can pick up a sheet to consolidate. I would like to take a table here. That's a new one because we did a sheet a while ago. And then I'm going to retain the data that I want to retain. The rest of them I'm going to remove it, and I extract it. That's going to showcase the entire data for me. I'll load all of them because I want to see all the data set. When I give an OK, and it loads the data set here. Again, you are seeing one more dimension here because you don't have the formatting of the data is properly coming up here. I'll go back to transform data above, detect data type, and that's going to change the data type completely. I know that this data is beyond Excel capacity, so I'm going to go back to home, close and load to, and then I'm going to add this to my data model. I'm going to create the connection here, add the data to data model. When I give an OK, that's going to tell you how many rows do we have here. If this is going to cross 10,48,576 rows, then I have done excuse me, something very right, so that my data will not shout at me, and I'll get exactly what I want to get out of this data in a better dimensions here. So this is loading around 12,70,000 rows. Yes, it's crossed marginally a bit of the rows here, so I know how to see the data. So I'll go back to my power pivot, manage data. I know all my data. This time around I'm going to bring in a different kind of a chart. This is something which we normally do in our interactive dashboard. That's what I did a while ago in our class number where we talked about pivot table interactive dashboards. I believe that class is class number 10. I'm not sure about the number because yes, this is class number 12. Yes, that should be class number 9 rather. So I'll go back to my pivot table and then I'll create a flattened pivot table or 4 charts here. So let me create a flow chart here, and then I'm going to put them in the same sheet. The moment I do it, it's going to give you the base of the 4 charts for me. The beauty of this is, in our interactive dashboard, I would have changed the color. Even though I've duplicated the sheet, I would have changed the color in multiple points. Then I would have combined them all in one single point. So now I don't want to do that. I'm going to just click this here. I'm going to pick up the class wise sales on the first data. That's giving you the data set automatically. I'll select the second one. I'll go back to the large data again. This time around I'm going to pick up. So this is taking a little longer than normal. I don't know why. Let me pick up the data here. Yes, I'm going to pick up the subcategory wise sales. You can see the color is changing automatically. And I'm going to pick up the data again. I'm going to ping the line code description by sales. I got a different color, and then I'm going to pick up the next one again. This time around, when I pick up the data sets, the data set is going to be a little different here. So normally when I take the data, it's going to pick up the data in a row, but again when I bringing in a flattened chart here, it's going to take the data set to my column automatically here. Again, the column will say, or it will give you an error message for you. I'm interested in the yearly sales. I'm going to remove all my other dimensions, and I like to put them in the access category, not in the legend series. And then I'm adding the sales to the below data here. You can see the colors are drastically changing. Again, the colors are coming normally here. If you want a different color, you can just go back to data series, and then you can change the fill color to something else. Again, making this and changing the data set accordingly. So we're going to see all these dimensions go a little differently. So I'll remove all our data. Again, the header is going to be another pain for us because we have to change these datas manually. I'll remove all the background lines also. So I'm removing all of them in one shot because so that I can change them all nice and clearly later. I'll call this as yearly sales. I know that this is not going to work for me as a data sets here. I'm going to say yearly sales, and then I'm going to call this as categorical sales here, cat sales. And then I'm going to call this as line sales. Let me check what are the fields that I've chosen here. So this is the class. Oh, sorry, this is okay. Category. I did it correctly. Yes, this is a class sales here. Now I got all of them. Let me just give a right click here, format access to the millions here. Place the cursor in here. Again, the field will stay there, so I can change them all nice and clearly first, and then I'll try to add the categorical or the numbers a little later. Then I'm going to add numbers to it. Again, you can see that a lot of decimal numbers are coming up here. The formatting part of the data sets are not really working here. In a normal pivot table, this would have taken the data beautifully, but here it is not taking the data perfectly. It's taking the data with a lot of decimals here. So let me just take the data label once and then convert that into currencies here. Again, this table will be available for you in all dimensions, so I can just take the currency into symbol. So this is how the data converts our data sets into it. Again, whenever we create a dashboard like this, I'll go back to the view and then I'll uncheck the grid lines. I will try to add some space above, and then I'll make this guys more readable for us. So let me just move them all. Again, move them carefully because don't move them rationally. Don't move it according to the data sets here. So now I got a list. I can either put a word art here. I'll call this as four chart sales dashboard. And then I'll move to my left and then make it more detail now, and then I'm going to just move this data to the, I'm just trying to figure out, or I'm trying to make sure the data sets are coming a little differently here. I don't want to maintain the same style I did a while ago or in my previous set of classes. So I would just want to make sure that the data sets are coming differently, and I can make this data look a little different here. I created a 4-chart pivot table using the Power Pivot Table Consolidation first, and then I got my results accordingly. And this is going to be a dynamic one. As I add the data, something on the Excel files is going to do it. That didn't happen for me in my other dimension when I added the text files here. I could have done that a little better, but I didn't add that file before it, and then when I tried to refresh it, it took a lot of time. I didn't refresh it. Let me see whether it is refreshing right now. So I'm going to use this as my data. So this is how we use Power Pivot for Excel files. Again, I created a flattened I could have created a flattened pivot table, but I didn't do it, so I created a 4-chart for us. Let me see whether my first data sets are updating right now. When I do that, let me go back to my data again, and then I'll try to open the text file that I've added. Excel, okay, did I put it somewhere in this data set itself? Okay, let me just, where did I save this? Okay, I saved it here. Let me see whether this is at least updating right now. I don't think it is updating anywhere. So now the refresh is okay. I'm enabling the content again, and then I'm just giving a refresh here. Okay, I don't think that the refresh is happening in here. Yes, the refresh is not still happening here, so never mind. I'm having the data sets in this way. That way it is going to showcase the data differently for us. This is how we can use Power Pivot and Power Query in Excel. With this, we are concluding our 60+ different formulas and function, and you have become a super user right now in pivot table, chart, slicer, timeline, Power Query, and Power Pivot. Again, we have a lot more to learn. I am about to introduce a new program in Power Pivot and Power Query in a detailed pattern where we'll touch a little bit of DAX function. So I'll touch this particular Power Pivot one more time with an ETL function in it. With this, I'll sign out today. This is Vinod signing out from our session today, and then have a great day ahead. And this is an epic day for me to complete our pivot table datasets. Thank you so much, guys. Happy learning and keep updating.